time to say very good afternoon to Baroness Hoey. Kate, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mike.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Now, I'm still a bit confused, I have to confess, about how this all kind of rolls out into the four nations of the United Kingdom, because presumably Nicola Sturgeon will take this information and she'll make her pronouncements in the next hour or so, and the same will happen in Wales, and the same will happen where you are in Northern Ireland.
Yes, and I'm a bit confused, having heard a little bit of all that. It sounded like football results reading out got through. It really did. Well, Northern Ireland, of course, is going from tomorrow. Northern Ireland is going into what would be called a full-scale lockdown again for 2 weeks.
Right.
And that will mean no shops, unless they're essential, and there's always this argument about who decides what's essential. No shops will open, pubs are closed. But we've had a week here where everyone has been able to do practically anything. So the whole thing's been a bit chaotic, and I think the reason of the 2-week lockdown was obviously there was an increase, but also to get us ready for the Christmas period. The idea was that if there was a full-scale 2-week lockdown, that would mean that people could then, mix at Christmas. But we're waiting for the final results on that, and I feel like everybody else completely confused about all the different tiers.
Yes. Well, I had to ask Charlotte Ivers, our political correspondent, what does Tier 2 mean now in London? Because apparently it doesn't mean what it meant before. Because before it meant you could go to the pub for a drink. Now apparently you can't go to the pub unless you're going to eat as well.
Yes, and then you're allowed to be outside with 6 people, but it doesn't say whether they're the same households or not.
No.
The worry about the Christmas thing and the 5-day thing, I think that does affect the rest of people who are coming from England, say, to Northern Ireland. If it's a 5-day period, if you can't get a flight, and there are very few flights now operating to Belfast, which means that you might have to go by train and boat, which, by the time you get there, 2 of your days have gone. So the whole thing is I think the reality is that people will be sensible, but at the same time, they are not going to be absolutely hidebound by every single little bit of restriction, because there are just so many anomalies.
Well, that's right. And also, as I say, my main misgiving with all of this is the figures that they're operating with and the data they're using to make these judgments. I can't explain, for example, and neither seemingly can anybody else, why Kent's figures have gone up so much.
Yeah, I just heard that there. That just seemed ridiculous, given there had been a complete lockdown. No one really has been able to give a satisfactory criteria for why they're deciding certain things. And obviously, the more people who are tested, the more people are going to show up with symptoms, with having COVID. But it doesn't mean they've got symptoms, and it doesn't mean that they're going to be particularly ill, or even that they're going to pass on. So I said before, and I've said it again, I honestly do think it's time for a new broom, a new health secretary.
Yes, you have said that before, and I think if they had taken your advice the last time you'd said it, they might be in a better place.
Yeah, I just think we need, the public now are getting, in my view, they're getting, well, apart from being confused, which we all are, they're actually getting rather tired of the same old story being put through and not understanding it.
Well, it is exhausting, isn't it? I actually did a kind of slightly tongue-in-cheek explanation of what all the rules now mean for what you can do at Christmas time, and 3 different households and all different bubbles, but now it depends on whether you're in 3 or 2 or 1. Can you travel over the border in Scotland? It really, I know that they have to, and I have some sympathy, don't get me wrong, with the people trying to administer all of this. But if you do look at Kent, to go back to that again, North Kent, which is basically South London, is a very different place to sort of rural Kent, which is further south, and you can't really lump both of them together, can you?
Yes, and there are parts of southern England where, around the Bournemouth area, where there's hardly any issues at all. I suppose the positive thing, if we want to be positive, is at least England is now out of a total lockdown, and things are going to be better for some people. But if you've been in tier 1 before the lockdown and suddenly you're in tier 3, then you really are going to be questioning who is making these decisions.
Yes, exactly right. But there doesn't seem to be any light at the end of the tunnel, despite what Matt Hancock said. At least for the first time that we're seeing the end of this. Perhaps Jonathan Ashworth not quite going along with that because, of course, Labour have been a bit schizophrenic through this whole pandemic, haven't they? They've on the one hand kind of agreed with the government's measures, but then said that they're not doing it the right way.
I mean, they've said that they're not going to make political football out of it, and then, of course, carry on.
And then they do, yeah.
Out of it. But that is the nature of politics. But I think we will find, if there is another vote on all of this, that it might well be that it's not going to be defeated. But I think it might well be that there are more people who are prepared to vote against, just to make make their voice heard and to show that there are some people who are questioning. I mean, we've seen some awful incidents of the way the police have acted in particular cases, and that also is, at the end of this, I think our police force are going to be held in a lot less feeling that people trust them because they've had to carry out and do things that we can't understand why they've done it.
Yeah, and as I said about Liverpool to Charlotte, it's all very well saying, well, the reason Liverpool's come out of it is because of all the testing that they've done and because they've managed to kind of beat the virus. But actually, all the testing has been done retrospectively. That means, 2 weeks ago, perhaps, there's less people infected. Doesn't mean 2 weeks from now there won't be more people infected.
Well, I've genuinely never understood the whole testing because, I could be tested today and be perfectly free. And then tomorrow I might think, oh, well, I'm free now. I don't need to do anything different. And you can pick it up wherever. So I think the testing, makes people feel better. I think that's part of it, that it's, if there's a lot of testing going on, then people feel that it must be helping.
Right.
Whether it actually is or not, I'm not.
But I spoke to a doctor this morning in London, Lawrence Gurlis, who's always very good on the ground and sort of giving us a feel for what's going on in GP surgeries. And he said at the height of this, in March and April, he had 40 to 50 patients who were off and ill with COVID, who were bedridden by it. Now he's got one. And I think that says it all, really.
But that never gets, you have highlighted that, and you're very good about highlighting some of the positive things, which is why people are listening to your programme, because they don't want doom and gloom that they're getting all the time from the BBC. And those are the kinds of things that just don't get in. We never hear how many people have recovered. And, our hospitals, we've kind of had this image that they're all absolutely packed full of people with COVID. They're not. The statistics show they're not, but we're not getting that across, and because it's part of the whole, and maybe understandably that's what the government want. They want people to feel almost frightened so that they will do what they've been asked to do. But it doesn't always work like that because people have got common sense, as we always talk about.
Well, that's right. Somebody sent me a tweet, actually. I can't find it right now, but from Northern Ireland, saying that they've had something like £2 billion in Northern Ireland for COVID in terms of the money that's been handed out. And they said it'd actually be cheaper to have bought everybody their own island for £1 million apiece.
No, it's absolutely right. And it is costing a fortune. And we saw that with the Chancellor's statement yesterday, just how horrific the debt is going to be. And how much it's going to ultimately, at the moment, it's not going to be costing individuals much more, but they are losing out in terms of jobs and the economy. It's just, I think he was very honest yesterday about just how bad things are going to be in terms of the economy. Yeah,
I think that's right. And I'm wondering when they're going to start mentioning taxes and all of that. But let's talk a little bit about the Irish situation, because Joe Biden, for no apparent reason, came out and said something which I thought was quite provocative over the last few days about their making sure that there will never be a border in Ireland. I mean, I don't think it's time for him to start saying anything like that at the moment, is it?
No, but I think we have to remember that the Irish lobby in America is very, very substantial, and of course he played the Irish card in terms of votes and so on. So for a period, obviously, he is going to be saying more of this. I think once he's actually in as president and he is surrounded by perhaps people who are a little bit more aware of what has really been going on, he might, quieten down. My concern is that this is all part of what we know that he is very pro the European Union. And of course, at the moment, with the negotiations going on, making it difficult and more controversial about the Irish border is something that he may well have been pushing almost deliberately. But the idea that there's going to be a border of any sort between the Republic and Northern Ireland is just nonsense. Even if we end up with no trade deal, the only way there'll be a border then would be if the Irish government decided they wanted to put something up. But I think he's got a lot of problems in his own country. I think he would be much better to concentrate on trying to sort out the terrible COVID situation there, and the fact that the country seems to be incredibly divided. So perhaps he should just stay well away from Irish matters.
Yes, I think that would be wise. Also, I think those people who you and I both know will jump on anything which is in any way pro-EU and make a big thing of it in this country. These are the same people who would like to have seen Biden win because they hope that he will somehow destroy Brexit, and it won't happen, which of course is nonsense and pie in the sky. But equally, this is a guy who has also said he wants to renew alliances and he wants to be a healing force. So I don't think that, as far as I'm concerned, sets him against policy from the UK in any way, shape or form. He wants to be friends with the UK. Clearly, he made that call to Boris Johnson. So that's, he's not going to try and affect Brexit.
No, and he couldn't at this stage, really. But also, I think it'll be interesting to see who he appoints as his ambassador to the United Kingdom, because that will be important. But also, I think the strength of the relationship between our two countries is huge, and goes back such a long time. And we get this discussion every time there's a new president about will it spoil the relationship. I can't see that happening, and I just think that we need to wait and see how he actually operates when he becomes president. And maybe an invitation from Her Majesty the Queen is usually the thing that actually ends up sorting out American presidents, isn't it?
Well, yes, absolutely right. They always fall for that one. And the other thing that very few people have mentioned this week, but it came across my desk, as it were, is the fact that our vaccine availability now is actually better than the rest of the European Union, because we're not in it anymore, and so we haven't had to fall prey to whatever their conditions were of buying in vaccinations. So there's already one benefit that very few people are actually talking about.
Yes, and again, we don't get much media attention to benefits, and there will be so many more benefits. I think that sort of entrepreneurialism and the independence of thought that we've got in the United Kingdom is the kind of thing that we will now be able to let loose, which we couldn't do in many, many ways with the European Union restrictions and rules. And that it will, gradually there are things happening, and it's very difficult for those who've been absolutely ardent Remainers to start accepting that actually there's some very good things that are going to be happening. So I've got a lot of confidence. I mean, I'm obviously disappointed in Northern Ireland that part of Northern Ireland is staying in it in the meantime in having to comply with EU rules for a while. But I'm hoping that will gradually change, and the people who voted leave here will also see the benefits of leaving.
Exactly right. And as far as the whole Brexit talks go, I mean, they've hit a bit of a standstill at the moment, haven't they, because of the COVID infections that have happened. But have you got any concerns about the fishing or anything like that?
Well, I will be very angry. I won't just be disappointed. I'll be very angry if there is any rowing back on the commitment that we need to have control of our own fishing waters. But that doesn't mean that we can't afterwards discuss sharing certain things. And obviously that happens with countries like Norway, who do have control of their own fishing waters. What I don't want to see is us giving up things in advance and giving up things almost as a way of getting something else. I can't stand this, we'll give you this if you give us that.
Right.
Fishing has to be I'm still hopeful that we'll get some kind of trade deal. But as I've always said, and I think a lot of us have said, it's not worth it if it's not going to be in our benefit, and if we are going to end up having still got some form of EU control over what we do. And that's why I've got a lot of confidence in David Frost, but ultimately he will come back and will probably say, Prime Minister, this is as far as I can go. This is all I can get. This is the end. Now you have to decide what you're going to do. And that's when I think all of us across the country who were leavers have got to stay true to the faith and make sure that we are not going to put up with it.
No, absolutely. Absolutely right. And finally, last time you and I spoke, Kate, we talked a bit about football. Unfortunately, Northern Ireland didn't get the result they were looking for that
No,
night. But the Scots are absolutely up in.
yes, I was very pleased for Scotland.
Yeah, I think everybody is, because the one thing you can guarantee in a tournament, if Northern Ireland or Scotland are there, it's always a lot better as a spectacle, apart from anything else, and much more fun is had. But what about Maradona? I mean, I don't suppose anyone was particularly shocked by the news yesterday. But what I really did enjoy was watching all of the footage of his football, and I thought one thing. Somebody put a tweet out of Maradona with the ball, and standing in front of him were 6 members of the Dutch football team trying to stop him, and he said this pretty much sums the guy up.
Yeah, no, he was. I mean, he was of his generation. He will go down as the best footballer, of his time, and competing probably with my one would be George Best,
yes,
of course, from Belfast. But I mean, Maradona was a different era, and also he did manage. I went to Mexico, actually. I was in Mexico for the World Cup in 1986, because Northern Ireland had qualified.
Yeah.
But I was watching Northern Ireland, Brazil, and various other. But at the same time, Maradona was what everyone was. That was who everyone was talking about in Mexico, and we don't get sports people, many sports people whose name is known all over the world and will be, whatever the problems about the goal that England lost to, although he scored a brilliant goal just after this hand of God goal, he scored another one, so England would have lost anyway. And I think people respect the fact that he just brought magic to the game.
Oh, he was absolutely unique, wasn't he? Utterly unique, and people.
But it's very sad, isn't it, that he obviously had problems, like a lot of very famous rich sportsmen.
Yes.
And
I think, I mean, because of where he came from, and he came from that. I mean, to me, the story that kind of is the best story of Maradona is his time in Napoli. When he actually not only raised the standard of their football so they could win the Italian league, but he also kind of transformed Naples while he was there, didn't he?
Yes, everybody knew who he was and what he was doing, and he was able to be a symbol for all sorts of good things. And you're just looking at those pictures now that I'm seeing. It's just it does. He was so young looking too, and that was the other thing. He was young when he played first for his country. And I think there'll be a lot of people. Everybody's forgotten the bad things that he did and the sad things, but. That's the end of another era, really, in terms of famous footballers.
No, of course, but a wonderful story. Sad. Some wonderful stories always have sad tinges as well, I suppose. Baroness Hoey, great to talk to you again. Thank you very much indeed. See you soon in London, we hope. Now that we are back into Tier 2, presumably people can come and see people in London again, as opposed to the lockdown where they weren't really allowed to do it, I think.